Hello, everyone. I think it's time to start. You know, it's interesting. When we opened the Switzerland Innovation Park at Novartis campus, we didn't know what to expect. Everybody was in home office. Would there be interest from startups who would like to build something up on the campus? 6 months later, we have 17 innovative companies with us on Novartis campus, and I'm happy to introduce one of them to you today. So hello and welcome everyone to this very first open mic session from Novartis campus. My name is Rahel. I'm the community manager at the Switzerland Innovation Park Basel area on Novartis campus. And I'm going to lead you through this session today. Let me just quickly share my screen. So I hope this works. This is actually the first in a series of open mic sessions, and we would like to show you what's going on at Switzerland Innovation Park on Novartis campus. Of course, we'd like to create business opportunities for all of you and introduce you to potential partners. So maybe you'll actually find your next collaboration partners at our event. I also saw that there were many registrations from Novartis employees. I'm very happy to see that you're interested in seeing what we're trying to build up here. We are actually constantly growing, and we are, of course, very proud to be part of this inspiring and innovative campus with Novartis. Today, we have our resident Holmusk presenting. Holmusk is headquartered in Singapore and is building the world's largest real-world evidence platform for behavioral health and chronic diseases. But before we start and I hand over to the Holmusk team, I'd like to give you some background on who we are and what we do. Switzerland Innovation Park Basel area is part of Switzerland Innovation's network of science parks. We work as a catalyst for innovation and progress. It means we connect, we support and engage people with ideas and passion in the fields of biotech, medtech, digital health, health tech, and industrial transformation. Our park is operated by Basel Area Business Innovation. That's the local investment and innovation promotion agency in the Basel region and dedicated to helping companies, institutions, and startups find business success in Basel area. Last summer, we opened our newest site on Novartis campus, providing office space and infrastructure to young ventures in the digital health sector. Further supporting our activities on the campus is the Day One Healthcare Innovation Initiative of Basel Area Business and Innovation. The initiative is on a mission to help shape the future of health by actually building a community and a network to connect, organizing many events to inspire, having catalyst projects to tackle bottleneck issues. They also run an accelerator program to support digital health startups from the region, and of course they're trying to get foreign direct investment into the Basel area, such as Holmusk, for example. So today's agenda looks as follows. We will start off with the Holmusk presentation, which will be followed by a live Q&A session, and then after 2 o'clock we will open our expo sessions, and you are very welcome to join the Holmusk team in their live sessions to further interact with them. Today we are using Hopin. For those of you who do not know how this works, it's quite easy. So now we're on the main stage. If you get lost, just hit the stage button on the left side in the screen. If after the event, after the presentation and the Q&A session, you can join us in the expo area. You see that on the bottom left, and select the session of your choice. During the event, everyone is muted. So if questions arise, and please feel free to share your questions, use the chat, which you can find on the right. There's an event chat and there's a stage chat. We will have a look on both of them. Also, if you would like to enlarge the presentations shown, just double click on the slides. And now I'm happy to invite our first speaker, Stefan, on stage. Stefan is head of Holmusk Europe and will introduce us to Holmusk and his role in the healthcare ecosystem. So, Stefan, ready when you are?
I'm ready. Thank you, Rahel, for the introduction.
You're welcome.
And a warm welcome from my end during these cold days here in Basel. And thank you as well to Rahel, the team at the Basel area Swiss, for having us today. Very happy to share what Holmusk is doing. We have a presentation which we wanted to share. I'm not sure if we can bring up the slides. Otherwise, I would need to maybe share it. If that's not working otherwise.
Hello.
Rush.
Yes, yeah, I'm in now. Sorry for the delay. I will share the slides now. Here we go.
Perfect. So these are the virtual experiences we all have these days again and again. So mental health is the cancer of tomorrow. That's the title of today, and we're going to talk a little bit why we are saying that. Over the past and still today, physical health is usually prioritized before mental health. You can go to the next slide, please. This is for many reasons. One is that there is a lack of evidence and lack of biomarkers to objectively assess and measure mental health conditions. And we at Holmusk, we are set out to change this paradigm. And as you can see, World Health Organization is saying very accurately, there is no health without mental health. So we should more consider as well the mental health state. On the next slide, you see indeed that mental health challenges are a growing concern. In a recent Lancet paper, there is a prediction that by 2030, accumulated $16 trillion will be the societal cost associated with mental health conditions. And that will be actually more than cardiovascular disease or for cancer during the same period. And we see on the investment side, new technologies emerge to allow a better understanding of brain function and evaluating health symptoms. And maybe mental health will be superseding the onco decade of investments which we have seen in the past. And if you look at some of the numbers, we have Galen Gross in their digital health investment report. They are basically saying or reporting the number that mental health has already lead to more investments than oncology in 2020, and clearly has the strongest growth in terms of investments. Cardiovascular is not too far away. And overall, we are seeing about 20 billion of R&D investments in the pharmaceutical area into neuroscience. So there are a number of signs here that mental health really becomes more important. And I think the current situation with COVID, where we are now all in and probably have made our own experience how it is to be isolated and feeling some of these social challenges, maybe we can relate a little bit better of what it means to some members of our society. On the next slide is basically a very short overview about Holmusk. Holmusk is 5 years in the market now. 100 people grow or strong. We are revenue generating. We are well funded. We have grown across or expanded the footprint across the globe. Since January, we are in Basel, next to our London office. We are in the US. We are in Asia. Headquartered is in Asia. We were named World Economic Forum Tech Pioneer in 2019 for our ability to work in real-world data at scale. In Europe, we are now 10 people. Growing. We are just in the acquisition phase of a company in the UK. We have data science joining us very soon. And we are still looking for the right support for us, for a person in business development. So that's something which is an opening at the moment. On the next slide, you see basically what is Holmusk actually selling. And in very short terms, we are selling three things. One is we are selling licenses to NeuroBlue. NeuroBlue is our real-world evidence platform in mental health, and you will hear much more about that in the session as we move ahead. Second, we are selling analytics. We engineer custom-made, explainable, predictive disease models, and this across the spectrum of chronic diseases. So that means next to mental health, we have established expertise in the cardiovascular space, chronic kidney disease space, and diabetes. And last but not least, and in order to reach the patient and physicians, we are having a number of digital therapeutics, which we are selling as decision support tools or disease management tools for patients. On the next slide, we basically see what actual problems is Holmusk solving. And you can see we are a real-world evidence company. So we are using real-world evidence across pharma, insurance, health insurance, and healthcare providers to allow better decision-making. For example, we are assessing performance of in-market products, of marketed therapeutics, highlighting the differences, what they're having, and looking at outcomes they are generating. For example, we can look at protocols, clinical protocols, treatment protocols, how are they followed, what health outcomes were actually generated by a particular product, maybe by a competitor product, and can we, for example, characterize subpopulations that would maybe show a specifically high response to a certain treatment. Another example is more in decision-making or in the decision support space, where we, for example, have created an algorithm that will look at depressive patients and is able to identify non-responder patients to first-line therapy in depressives, in antidepressives, first-line therapies, about 12 months earlier than in average a physician would notice it. And therefore, we can upgrade that patient to the right treatment much faster. This leads to more personalized treatment, reduces waste in the healthcare system, and therefore has as well a positive benefit on the healthcare costs and resources consumed. Now, without further ado, we want to take a look into our NeuroBlue platform, and I'm glad to hand you over to my colleague, Dr. Rashmi Patel, who is our Chief Medical Officer for Europe, to give you a brief on what NeuroBlue is. Over to you, Rashmi.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Stefan, for that great introduction about Holmusk and what we are aiming to achieve here. And I'd like to give you in a few minutes just a summary of what our mission is and why we're trying to achieve what we're trying to do here. And in this slide, you can see essentially in this schematic at the bottom just summarizes exactly what we're trying to do. And that is to generate good quality evidence in mental health care, which will address the gap in evidence to improve the treatments for people who are suffering with mental disorders. And in this schematic, you can see three components. On the left here, this iMac with some charts on that represents the provider, the clinician who is seeing the patient. And this is the electronic health record, all the clinical data for that individual when they come to the clinic and they receive treatment. Then on the right-hand side here, this is smartphones, which represent what the individual patient has. And this will allow them to connect to the EHR, to the clinician, and also can include digital therapeutics to help support them in their recovery from their mental illness. Then at the bottom here, we're going to spend some time talking about NeuroBlue, which is really the glue in this whole schematic about being able to take some of the data that we generate in the electronic health record and from digital therapeutics and patient-reported measures and analyze these data in a bespoke analytics framework, which will allow us to generate the evidence which we can then feed back to the providers and to the patients in the form of digital therapeutics to improve the clinical outcomes in mental disorders. And after this main session, there will be a series of booths which we will describe, and you can come and join one of the booths and learn a bit more about some of these areas. So now in this slide, this essentially expands upon the concepts I have just introduced in terms of the kind of data assets that Holmusk is working with and what we are hoping to grow over the next few years. And you can see here the sources of data include the data from the hospitals generated through electronic health records, from the patients themselves, which can be generated through digital apps on the smartphone. And then through the NeuroBlue platform, we have a process where we can integrate data from these different sources, de-identify them into a research-grade repository, which will allow researchers and developers to analyze these data, answer specific questions about, for example, treatments or pattern of mental illness, some of the risk factors, which will allow us to generate evidence which we can then take back to the patients and the clinicians to improve the quality of care. And this will become a lot more clear when we show you some examples later on in our presentations in the booths. Alongside this framework, of course, we don't operate in isolation. In order to enable this, we need to have very close collaboration with the providers of mental health care. And that is through close collaboration with providers in the US as part of the MindLink Global Database, which is a database of electronic health record data from 25 clinics in the US. And we've got quite a long period of follow-up, over 500,000 patients. And these data are what are fed into our NeuroBlue platform, and we can analyze these data in order to better understand mental disorders and the impacts of treatments. As we go forward, we will also be developing digital therapeutic tools, which can be delivered through the smartphones. And we can integrate the data from both of these sources in order to generate the evidence which will improve mental health care. This is just a summary of the data set that we have available. I don't have enough time to go through this in detail, but in this main stage, but please do join some of our booths later on and I can explain. But we have here around 550,000 patients with over 20 years of follow-up and 50 million rows of data, different types of data points, which can include diagnoses, treatments, clinical presentations, symptoms across a range of mental disorders. And the data that we have available can be broken down into structured data and unstructured data. The structured data includes outcome measures, such as the CGIS, Global Assessment of Functioning, diagnostic codes, prescriptions, demographic data, and contacts, hospitalizations. But here is really where the innovation happens with the unstructured data, which contains a huge, rich clinical data source of what symptoms, what clinical presentations people are experiencing, some of the external stresses, social and occupational factors which may affect someone's presentation, and also the effects and side effects of medication. The data from this electronic health record database is what we plug into our NeuroBlue platform. And essentially what this is it is an interface which allows the user to conduct focused queries on the electronic health record data, all of the data that is made up of the MindLink Global Database. and perform statistical analyses to look at the associations between different factors and clinical outcomes. We've already begun to analyze some of these data in order to understand features related to clinical outcomes, and also to characterize the clinical presentation of people with mental disorders. And our aim is to supplement the data we already have available with additional data as we get access to further electronic health record data, and eventually with integrations with smartphone apps to be able to bring in patient-reported data as well. So at that point, I would now like to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Jordan Abdi, who is the head of strategic partnerships in Holmusk Europe, and he's just joining us now. So I will stop sharing my screen, and he will present you a demo of the NeuroBlue system. So over to you, Jordan.
Thank you very much, Rashmi, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very excited to be able to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into our NeuroBlue dashboard. This won't be a full demo as such. We don't have you a flavor, a little bit of what Rashmi's been describing in this platform. And I'll start, I think, first with the database. Rashmi's given a fantastic overview of what the database includes. And that's really what we have here at the moment here, NeuroBlue database. This one here is that MindLink data set, 550,000 patients. However, this is just what we have at the moment. It's one of the richest and largest data sets of its kind because of how rich the outcome measures are. That is, for nearly 100% of clinical encounters, we have structured outcome measures. And the importance of that I'll come to later. By the end of the year, we're hoping to grow this quite dramatically. It's about 2 million patient records by close of 2021. And as Rashmi says, in time, we'll be able to plug in digital therapeutic and digital solutions data directly from patients. So let's take a look at this data set and see what it is we're talking about. So with the MindLink data set, this platform allows you to very rapidly get a good sense of what's going on overall and give you a sense of, is this the sort of patient cohort that you're looking for? Here, for example, you can see within this database what prescriptions look like at a high level, but we can do more structured and more specific analysis with time. But this gives you, I guess, a sense of what the overall data set looks like. If you're interested in understanding precisely what the data tables look like, these are all made available for you to see for the first sort of 50 or so patients at any given table. And you can see here we've got date of birth, obviously anonymized to the extent to which you can, so that you can't see either month or actual day, gender, provider, ethnicity. And for example, I'll show you another table, family history. Again, patient ID is all linked, so you can match patients. Again, you've got the diagnosis and the relationship. And again, all these tables are available. If you go through to the specifications, and if you really do want to dig deeper, and we can do this maybe if you are interested, you want a proper demo, all of this is available and explained in depth. So if you come to our data dictionary and you want to understand, for example, what the table means, we go to the family history, all the fields are explained. And you can sort of, when you're preparing your analysis, understand what it is you're looking at and what it is you need for your analysis. Similarly, if we want to look at variables, so I mentioned earlier, and Rashmi alluded to, the richness of the outcome measures. In mental health, there are no blood tests. There are no scans. There exists very little in the way of hard structured biomarkers that exists for the rest of medicine. And so it largely relies on these quantitative assessments by clinicians. Most data sets do not include these in a structured way. MindLink was built about 20 years ago, very much with the intention of being used for research. And so when clinicians inputted data within the electronic health record, these fields were mandatory, which means for all these encounters, you can see a richer level of granularity as to how patients were doing over time. Okay, I think that's enough on the data set itself. If you have more questions, by all means, we will have time for that. What I really want to get into is what you can do with this platform. So the first feature I'm going to show you is our cohort builder. If you have a particular question or you're trying to understand the market, what we have here is the ability to break down or subtype this overall data set for your own analysis. And we've done a little bit of preparation for you already. Here, for example, is a cohort of patients we've built for major depressive disorder. So what we can do quite dynamically and easily is select a term, for example, in this case, major depressive disorder, and you can, with great detail, select precisely which ICD codes you're referring to when you talk about major depressive disorder. You can add a therapy, in this case, fluoxetine, and you can add other things. For example, you may want to know, for example, what it looks like in women, and you can see how quickly it was able to draw this information for you. For this, though, we won't be needing that. And similarly, you can do the same for race, you can do the same for age, or whatever other sort of metrics you're looking for your analyses. And I've built a similar cohort here for a different therapy, duloxetine, again in the same cohort of patients. We've got a different number here, and you can see all of the distribution for this particular subgroup that you can use to assess whether or not this is the right subgroup for your analysis. And the question you can really answer is limited only by your imagination or by the needs that you currently have. As the data set grows, the ability to ask more nuanced questions really has no limit. And so what does this all mean? Why do I want to build cohorts? Why do I want to ask these sorts of questions? Well, you might want to sort of understand, for example, how different therapies have acted on particular cohorts of patients. And this is, again, one we prepared earlier. So if we look at, for example, these two cohorts, duloxetine and fluoxetine within the MDD population, within the data set, we can run this and we can find out precisely what the, you can see how quickly it loaded that there. We can find precisely what the outcome measures look like in this cohort. So the study we've run here is, what is the change in CGIS? This is a clinical global impression severity score used for depression, amongst other things. You can see what does that outcome look like after 10 weeks of treatment. And here, for example, is the sort of initial box plot you can bar plot you can pull out, and further analysis, of course, is available. I think, given time, I'll stop here. Hopefully, that was a nice sort of high-level view as to what the product is and what we can do. It's our most exciting product. There are more features, I think, for today. However, I think we will stop there. If you have further questions, we'll be available in the booths and also at the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan, for this overview and showing again this impressive data set. It's always, to me, still amazing what's possible, and it's basically work of about 3 years, 4 years of data curation, harmonization, together with Duke University, which has been the original initiator and still supporting us in moving ahead. It's full web-based, so accessible from anywhere, and it's as well our contribution to democratize access to such data, which is otherwise reserved to a small group of people. Now, we are for you here for another hour. I'm not sure, Rahel, whether we still have time for Q&A now. Happy to take questions now. Otherwise, we will be around at the booth for the next hour. If you want to join us there, we have a real-world analytics booth, we have a digital therapeutics booth, and we have a mental health NeuroBlue booth. You will see it when you navigate through the page, and we are happy to meet you there for further discussions. You see here as well the Holmusk leadership team, which is in total, all the 5 people are here for you. So make use of them, ask many questions, and use all your imagination, as Jordan was saying. Right, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Stefan, Jordan, and Rashmi for these presentations. I think it would be good if we address 2 or 3 questions here in the main session, and then you can head over to the booth and answer the more specific questions there. So one question that came up was, are mental health pathologies such as depression really growing, or is it just diagnosed more than before?
That's a very good question, and I think Rashmi will be best placed to give an estimate on that. Yes.
So this is a question which often comes up, and as many of you will know that over the years, the diagnostic classification systems for mental disorders have changed, thresholds have changed, and so we know that there is have been some changes in the incidence and prevalence of mental disorders. Whether that's due to additional diagnosis, that's quite possible. But the other thing we do know, and if you come to my booth, I'll present some data on this, is if you look at the relationship between burden of illness, disability as a result of different physical and mental health disorders, we are seeing an increased proportion of the burden of illness is being attributable to mental disorders over the past 2 or 3 decades. And that is certainly visible globally, both in high-income countries and low-income countries. And whether that is additional diagnosis or we're recognizing the disability is difficult to tell, but there's certainly an increase in the global burden of illness.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question that was, who is the owner of the data and how can people manage the data?
That's always a European question, and Yolanda, certainly you can answer that.
I can give a bit of background. Yeah, so we have and we follow a bunch of different regulations because we operate in different areas of the world. Specifically, if we're talking about NeuroBlue and this data set, the consent was given, I believe, within the beginning of the patient using accessing certain services in a clinic that uses the software from which the data comes from, which is the MindLink EHR. So the moment that the user enters care there, the moment that this software is used, that's part of the process of consent to record that information. And because of the specific software and how it was set up, so for research purposes, part of the consent was that an anonymized version of this data then would be available for research substantially, right? Like whoever owns the data set. So that's kind of how it works within that. Now, it works very differently for digital therapeutics. So for other products that we have, like the sort of mobile applications that Rashmi and Stefan were talking about, then we have informed consent prior to you even entering the app, right? You cannot access the services unless you have understood what it looks like and what data you are giving or not giving access to. And if whatever program that happens or occurs, for example, within the European Union, there's always, of course, the ability of the patient or the user to sort of, contact us and have all prior information deleted and no longer belong to us. So it's complex because it depends very much on the program and it depends very much on which area it's servicing. And we are facing some very interesting questions right now because pharmaceutical companies are across the world. And they would like to look at data that has ties legally to different countries in the world. How do we then sort of unlock that? And there are some interesting technological solutions that we can look at to allow people to look at insights of data without actually looking at the data. So that the data that is tied to the US, for example, remains physically stored in the US, and the data that's tied, say, to the UK remains physically stored in the UK. But me, pharmaceutical company, I want to have a look at both of them across. How do I do that without actually violating any of those laws? So those are more technical challenges that we're starting to tackle now because we have set up this kind of infrastructure, and that's the next logical question for many of our users.
But it's certainly in the center of attention, of course, to everybody working in healthcare space, and we're trying to do the best that we can to manage all these different complexities. And I think so far we are well on a good path. Just to add, maybe on the NeuroBlue data set, the advantage really here is that this is initiated by Duke University for the purpose of doing research. So this was already many years back when we didn't have such stringent laws, was already initiated that way, that we have consent from the very beginning, and we benefit now obviously from that. And it's a stable set of 25 clinics which deliver that data at the same conditions, with the same treatment protocols and same guidance on treatment. So that all adds to the strength and the homogeneity of the data which we can later on now collect in NeuroBlue.
And to that point, it's why there's nothing else in the world exists like it. There is no other mental health data set that has been collecting consented data for 20 plus years. There's also no such data that was from the get-go an academic data set, which is why we have such a rich outcome measures that allows you to do the analysis that we're able to do with the data set. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So we're quite fortunate and privileged to use this sort of data for the purpose of pushing forward mental health innovation and bringing better care to patients.
Great. I think for time reasons, I would close the formal part of the event now. So for those of you who have to head off, thank you for your participation, and I hope to see you soon at our next event. We will do these sessions on a bi-monthly basis.